remember sitting over my sink, shotgunning a beer, and looking at my wife and her just giving me the dirtiest, most disgusting look I've ever seen in my life. That was the point of me saying, all right, it's time to quit doing this shit. Like it's time to man up and start figuring something out. My name is Damian Story, and I'm a police officer at the Stillwater Police Department. Growing up, I've had family members in military or police, so that was always going to be an option. My dad was a police officer in a very small town for, 5 or 6 years probably. You know, once you hear the sirens and play with the red and blue lights, it kind of sucks you in, and it's kind of it for you. I still remember when I went through my kindergarten graduation, they ask you what you want to be when you grow up. I said, I'm going to be a police officer. I think everybody's first thought of being a police officer is you get to drive fast and do cool things. I knew what I was getting myself into for the most part. So I came home from college in May of 2014, started working at a power line company, doing highline work with a buddy of mine from high school. His wife at that time was friends with my wife. He set us up on a blind date, and we went out on a date, and it just kind of went from there. We clicked. She understood as we got older together the ins and outs of being around someone who's been in law enforcement. He kind of understands the quirks of everything that goes on. So we dated for about a year, and then we got married a year later. So we got married in June of 2016. She was supportive of me wanting to do it, but I think she had her reservations of me wanting to be in law enforcement. She was on board at that time. I got out in 2016, and then I started doing the job I've always dreamed of, My very first call on my own was a fatality accident. Totally brand new. No idea what's going on. First time I'd ever seen anything like that. It's just not normal people are exposed to that stuff. And I was good. I was good with it. It's part of the job, right? That's what they teach you. They teach you that all the way through the academy. They teach you that all the way through in-house. It's part of the job. You're going to see and do stuff that normal people don't do. Shortly after that was probably the most impactful call of my entire career so far. My wife was pregnant with our first child, and she was 8 months pregnant. And we had some normal drug users in our town call us and say, hey, we found this weird thing in a dumpster. The story was that they had found an alien inside of a house in a box, and that the person that lived in that house had taken this box and put it in a big roll-off dumpster. So we get there and we look around and don't see anything at first. It's a rundown, abandoned house. It's drug house. That's where everybody goes to kind of hang out. So we get in there, we're digging around. Sure enough, we find this box and pull it out, open it up. There's just a blanket. Like, this blanket was meant to fit inside this box. It was folded like perfectly inside here. So we start kind of going through the box. We get to the middle and there's nothing in it. But the blanket's like soaking wet at the bottom, which was the weirdest thing. It just didn't make any sense at that time. I grab the corner of the blanket, I pull it out, and the next thing I see in the corner of this box is probably hadn't been born yet, but had been gestationally inside of somebody for about 8 months. She had this baby and thought it was an alien and shoved it in this box, threw a blanket over it, and then put it in a dumpster. We closed down the house, put crime scene tape up, called detectives, did all that. I went back to the PD, and I don't remember who I was talking to. I don't remember who I mentioned it to, but I had said, man, that sucked, and was kind of talking about it. And the response that I got was, suck it up. It's part of the job. That was a big eye opener for me, because they preach all of this in the academy, which it's true to an extent of brotherhood in this line of work. And until it comes to something like that where you need to talk to somebody. And I was the same way for a long time. A lot of us, we say, well, it's part of it. Just, you got to get past it. There was a lot of things that hit home with that specific case. That was when I started to not talk about what was going on and just turn to alcohol. I hid it in plain sight from everybody, except for my wife and my kids. They were the ones that dealt with everything. And then that just kind of consumed my life for about 8 years. And the people that I needed to rely on the most were telling me to suck it up and just get over it. So whereas my buddies saw it as, let's go out and hang out and have a drink, my wife saw it as me not being at home with her and my kids and just going out and drinking and leaving a brand new infant baby with, at that point, a 20-year-old girl by herself, and neglecting that entire part of it because I was so consumed with being with my buddies and dealing with my things that way instead of seeking out what I should have sought out a long time ago. I hid it from my family. I hid it from her family. No one knew. No one knew what was going on. And I just told my mom this the other day. We were talking that I was coming to do this. And I told her that, I told her, I said, you never knew any of this was going on. She said, no, I didn't. I hid it. I hid it very well from everybody. My buddies looked at it as us hanging out. Whereas, we would go out and drink and I would drink a bottle of whiskey by myself with no issues. And that was just the norm. That was normal for me. But then I'd come home and pass out and my wife wouldn't get any help from me. And so she was basically raising a child on her own. I was there, but I wasn't. My body was there, but that was about it. I wasn't going around sneaking drinks and, it was hiding in plain sight. That's who I was at that time. 22 years old, having dealt with two things in a year that 80-90% of the population won't ever deal with. Where it was to the point where I was at rock bottom. It was constant arguments with my wife about my drinking, constant arguments of me not helping with the kids, constant arguments of everything. And as bad as it is to say, I got better at hiding it. I was coaching t-ball. I did that with my kids. But then I'd go home and I would drink more. It was to a point where when I was working night shift, when I first started, I'd get off at 7:30 in the morning and I would, go home, and I thought it was a normal thing to do. I'd drink 6 or 12 beers and I'd go pass out and go to sleep and wake up and go to work the next day. No issues. I thought no issues, but there was issues. It was bad. We got to the point where we sat down and had a very long talk about she was leaving. She was going to take the kids, and we were going to get a divorce. I always said to my wife, I don't want to be part of that statistic, because we have a high divorce rate. We have a lot of high rates for a lot of things in this career. And I always preached that, but I would never do my part to make sure that wouldn't happen. Kept saying I'll never go to therapy because who's going to understand what I've been through? I'm not going to talk to somebody. They're not going to know they're not going to know what I've done or how it affects me or anything like that. Warriors rest. Put on a class. I needed my mental health hours. That's all I needed. I needed 2 hours of mental health. We're required by the state to get 2 mental health hours. So I'm like, you know what? Whatever. I'll go to this class. I'll breeze through it, and I'll get my mental health hours, and I'll be done. The first day of that class, Kathy was our teacher. She was our instructor. And, when I tell you, sucked in, within before lunch, I was there. I'm in it. Because I'd never been to a class that talked about mental health for officers or anything related to us and what we can do to help ourselves on the inside. That never occurred to me ever. So that was a 3-day class, and that 3-day class happened, and we started our peer sport team at our department. And right when they said that, I put in my notice that I wanted to be a part of it. I know the importance of mental health in law enforcement when, for years, and it still is. But for years, it was a stigma. We don't talk about that. We don't do that. We're Superman. We go out here, we fight bad guys, we save people's lives, and then we go home, and then we come back, we do it again the next day. No one talks about what happens when you're at home. I would go to work happier than what I was when I was at home, because I was around people who related with me. So I'd go to work and I was totally fine. I was never in a bad mood, nothing. I had no issues, no matter what happened. But I'd go home and I'm like, I'm ready to go back to work. But I'd drink for my 3 days off, and then I'd go back to work and I was totally fine. Like nothing's happening. Nothing was going on in my house. I was good. We were good. We were all good. But in reality, it was just, I was masking everything. And I used work to mask that. We all look at it as mental health or mental anything in this career as a weakness. We look at it and we're like, well, that guy can't hack it. That's how we look at it as. And that was hard for me to accept, even for a while after that.